At the family party, my son-in-law pulled out my chair. I fell hard, my hip cracking against the floor, and the laughter of my own blood filled the room like cruel applause. It wasn't the pain that stung. It was the sound. My daughter Lauren covered her mouth, shoulders shaking with muffled giggles. Bradley, her husband, bent over with laughter. Even his parents chuckled, as if humiliating me was part of the entertainment. For a moment I stayed on the ground, staring at the faces I had once trusted. No one gasped. No one rushed to help. Finally, Margaret, Bradley's mother, muttered, "Brad, that's enough. Help him up before he hurts something." Bradley extended his hand lazily, still grinning. "Come on, Pops. Just a bit of fun. Don't take it so hard." I let him pull me to my feet. My hip screamed, but I didn't show it. I brushed off my slacks, straightened my back, and sat down again. Inside, something shifted, as if a final thread of patience had snapped. The party rolled on, music, glasses clinking, shallow laughter. I sat back, listening more than I spoke. Years of teaching had trained me for this, to stay quiet while others revealed more than they realized. Every careless word, every offhand glance, painted a picture. Bradley bragged to Walter, his father, about big changes coming soon. Lauren floated between them, smiling too easily, too eagerly. Even Margaret, who once treated me with polite distance, now smirked when Bradley raised his glass. "Once we settle things here, life will be smooth sailing," Bradley declared. "Settle things here." The words struck me like a pebble to glass, small, but enough to start a crack. By the time the last guest left, the kitchen was a battlefield of paper plates and sticky glasses. Bradley and Walter stepped outside to smoke. Margaret stacked dishes with sharp clinks of porcelain. Lauren hummed while tidying, her voice light, rehearsed, almost mocking. I lingered in the hallway, unseen. "He'll sign it if we make it look like it's his idea," Bradley whispered through the screen door. Walter gave a grunt of approval. The old man's too trusting. Always was. Their laughter followed, low and certain. My jaw tightened. I climbed the stairs without a word, though each step felt heavier than the last. In my room, I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, but sleep never came. The laughter replayed, sharper with each echo. To them, I wasn't a father, not even a person. I was an obstacle, something to be moved, signed away, erased. At 2 a.m., I rose quietly and walked to my study. From the bottom drawer, I lifted Sarah's old jewelry box. Beneath her ring lay the deed to this house, the home I had built with decades of work. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal, heavy as iron. The air in the study carried Sarah's scent still, faint lavender, though the bottle on her dresser had been empty for years. I sat for a long time, remembering her voice. She had been sharper than me when it came to people, always spotting dishonesty before it surfaced. "They'll show you who they are if you're patient," she used to say. My reflection in the glass of the window stared back. Wrinkles deepened, hair silvered, but my eyes were still sharp, still alive. That night I promised myself I would follow Sarah's lesson. Watch, wait, collect. I wouldn't confront them now. Confrontation only gives liars time to twist their story. No, I would let them believe I was blind. I would let them grow careless. And when greedy people grow careless, they always leave evidence. When I finally closed the drawer and returned to bed, the house was silent. But inside me, a storm had begun. The morning after the party, the house smelled of stale wine and fried food. Empty bottles clinked in the trash, and confetti still clung to the carpet. My hip ached when I stood, but I moved slowly, steady, refusing to limp. Pain would have been a victory for them. Lauren breezed into the kitchen first, scrolling through her phone, her hair still tousled from the night before. She poured herself coffee into one of Sarah's favorite mugs without asking, humming like nothing had happened. "Morning, Dad," she said, not even looking at me. Bradley came down a few minutes later, yawning theatrically. "How's the hip, Pops?" he asked, grinning. "Hope I didn't break you last night." I stirred my coffee, unblinking. Takes more than a chair to do that. He smirked, clearly disappointed he hadn't rattled me more. Walter and Margaret joined soon after, moving about the kitchen like they owned it, discussing plans for the week, errands, appointments. Not once did they ask me what I wanted. After breakfast, I slipped outside. The air was cool, sharp, the kind that woke your senses. At the curb, the mail truck rattled to a stop. The postman, a young man with kind eyes, handed me a small stack of envelopes. Bills, advertisements, and one thick, official letter sealed with a county court stamp. The name on the envelope was not mine. It was Bradley's. I stood in the driveway, staring at it, the weight of the paper heavy in my hand. For a moment I considered setting it on the counter like always, but something in me shifted. Instead, I carried it inside, silent, and placed it right on the kitchen table where Bradley couldn't miss it. Minutes later, he appeared. His eyes fell on the envelope, and the smirk he'd worn all morning faltered. He sat down slowly, tearing it open, scanning the contents. His lips moved as he read, his face draining of color with each line. "What is it?" Lauren asked, peering over his shoulder. He shook his head, folding the letter quickly, too quickly. "Nothing, just paperwork." But I had seen enough in that brief flash across the table. The header, Notice of Pending Investigation, Property Misrepresentation and Attempted Fraud. His hands trembled as he shoved the paper back into the envelope. He stood abruptly, muttering something about needing air, and stalked out to the porch. Walter followed, confused. Margaret and Lauren exchanged nervous glances. I stayed seated, sipping my coffee. From the porch, I could hear Bradley's voice rising, low and frantic. "I told you to keep it quiet. How the hell did they find out?" Walter muttered something I couldn't catch, but the edge of panic in Bradley's tone was enough. Lauren slipped outside to join them, her voice hushed and urgent. Margaret stayed behind, fussing with dishes, her hands shaking just enough for me to notice. I wrote nothing in Sarah's notebook that morning. The evidence was already in my mind, carved sharp as stone. The letter had done its work. It had cracked Bradley's smug mask in front of everyone. Later that day, when he returned, his confidence was gone. His laughter was quieter, forced. He jumped each time the phone buzzed, and he avoided meeting my eyes. Lauren tried to smooth things over with a smile too wide, her words dripping with false cheer. Margaret and Walter whispered more, but their whispers carried the thin edge of worry. By evening, Bradley had stuffed the letter into his briefcase, locking it tight. But the damage was done. His hand had shaken. His mask had slipped. That night, as I made my rounds through the house, checking doors and windows, I paused at the study. I opened the drawer, touched Sarah's jewelry box, then the deed beneath it. Their laughter from the party echoed faintly in my memory, but now it mingled with Bradley's frantic words from the porch. I knew then that Sarah had been right. Greed blinds people. It makes them sloppy. And now Bradley had shown me his first real weakness. I closed the drawer gently, turned off the light, and went upstairs. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The day after Bradley received the letter, the mood in the house shifted. Breakfast was quieter than usual, tense. Bradley's hands shook faintly as he buttered his toast, though he tried to disguise it with a cough. Lauren filled the silence with cheerful chatter, too forced. Her smile stretched thin. Walter pretended to read the paper, though the pages didn't turn for 10 minutes. Margaret pushed eggs around her plate without eating. "Everything all right?" I asked mildly, sipping my coffee. Bradley forced a grin. "Fine, Pops. Just tired. Long night." But his eyes betrayed him, darting toward his briefcase near the door, where the cursed letter lay hidden. The rest of the morning they moved in pairs. Lauren whispered with Bradley in the kitchen, their voices sharp and clipped. Margaret trailed Walter into the yard, their conversation low, punctuated by nervous glances back at the house. It was as though the walls themselves pressed in on them, demanding answers they didn't have. I said nothing. Silence has always been my strongest weapon. People reveal more when they believe they're not being watched. By midday, Lauren entered my study with a folder in her hands. She hesitated at the door before stepping inside, her tone unnaturally sweet. "Dad, can we talk?" I looked up from Sarah's notebook, pen still in hand. "Of course." She set the folder on the desk, sliding it toward me. "These are just options, papers to make things easier for you, so you don't have to deal with all the stress of bills, maintenance, property taxes." I didn't touch the folder. "And who deals with the stress if not me?" Her smile wavered. "Bradley and we'd take it on. You could relax, travel if you wanted, or just enjoy peace of mind." Peace of mind. The phrase sounded hollow in her mouth. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. "You think I need that?" "I think you deserve it," she said quickly, eyes flicking toward the folder. "Just look them over. No pressure." I let the silence hang until she fidgeted, then nodded once. "I'll read them later." Relief flooded her face. Too obvious. She left the study quickly, closing the door behind her. When she was gone, I opened the folder. As expected, authorization forms, power of attorney drafts, even a deed transfer prepared in suspicious haste. No lawyer's letterhead, only blank templates filled with Bradley's clumsy attempts at legal jargon. He'd copied phrases from the internet, thinking I wouldn't notice. I wrote in Sarah's notebook, January 17th. Lauren presented forged documents. Poorly written, no legal authority. Confidence clearly shaken after letter. That evening, Bradley paced the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, urgent. "I don't care how, just fix it. Can't be tied back to me." He turned sharply when he noticed me standing in the doorway. "Everything all right, Pops?" he asked too quickly. "Fine," I said, walking past him to refill my water glass. His eyes followed me, wary, as if he suspected I knew more than I let on. Later that night, Margaret cornered me in the living room. "David," she began, her tone softer than usual. "You've done enough, really. You should let the younger generation handle things now. Don't you want less worry?" Her words echoed Lauren's, almost verbatim. I realized then they'd rehearsed this, a chorus of persuasion designed to wear me down. I smiled faintly. "Less worry comes in different forms, Margaret." She blinked, unsure how to respond. When the house grew quiet, I walked through each room as I always did. Bradley's briefcase sat in the corner of the living room. I noted the way the lock clicked unevenly, as if it had been opened too many times that day. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. In my study, I placed Richard's folder, the real documents, beside Bradley's forgeries. I left the drawer slightly open, a silent invitation. Curiosity and greed are powerful lures. Before bed, I stood at Sarah's photo on the desk. Her eyes seemed to meet mine, steady and knowing. "They're getting sloppy," I whispered. "It won't be long now." Upstairs, Bradley's voice drifted through the vent again. "He's softening," he told Lauren. "He'll sign this week. We just need to keep pushing." I closed the notebook with deliberate care. Each word they spoke was another stone in the wall I was building around them. And when the last stone fell into place, they wouldn't even realize they'd bricked themselves in. 2 mornings later, I decided it was time to stop simply watching and start preparing. The letter had shaken Bradley, but fear has a way of hardening into desperation. If they felt cornered, they would push harder. And desperate people make dangerous choices. I left the house just after breakfast, telling them I had errands in town. No one questioned me. Lauren was busy wiping crumbs off the counter, Bradley sulking with his phone, Margaret fussing about laundry. Walter mumbled something about groceries but didn't even look up. To them, my comings and goings were background noise. Downtown, I parked 2 blocks away from an old brick office I hadn't visited in years. The sign on the door still read Richard Hale, attorney at law. He had retired 5 years back, but I knew he kept this office alive for special matters. Matters just like mine. He was waiting when I arrived, standing by the window with a cup of tea. "David," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "It's been too long." I sat across from him at the old oak desk, its surface scarred with decades of cases. I wouldn't have come if it weren't serious, I said quietly. Then it must be very serious, he replied. Tell me. So I did. The chair at the party. Their laughter. The whispers through the door. The way Lauren slid forged papers across my desk with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The county letter that landed in Bradley's hands, making him tremble. I laid it out in order, each detail like a chess move. Richard listened, his brow furrowed deeper with every sentence. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. Classic coercion, he said finally. They want you to sign everything over voluntarily. That way it's clean. No fraud to prove, at least not on the surface. I won't confront them outright, I said. I want them to show their hand, and I want proof that no one can twist. He nodded slowly. You always were patient. All right, here's what I can do. I'll draft documents that look legitimate, property transfers, powers of attorney, all of it. But inside the legalese will be clauses that protect you completely. If they push you to sign, they're walking into their own trap. And if they sign anywhere, their intent becomes evidence. Ironclad. I met his eyes. Will it hold up? Every word, he said firmly. But you have to keep calm. Let them think they're in control. That's when they get sloppy. I thought of Sarah. Her quiet warnings, her steady gaze. They'll show you who they are if you're patient. Richard pulled a thin folder from his drawer and slid it across the desk. I'll have the full set by the weekend. For now, keep doing what you're doing. Watch. Write it down. Collect. I left his office lighter than I'd felt in weeks. Not happy, not safe, but certain. Certainty is its own kind of strength. Back home, the house buzzed with tension. Bradley sat stiffly at the table, his phone face down, his jaw clenched. Lauren greeted me with false cheer, her words spilling too quickly. Margaret set a stack of brochures on the counter, retirement communities, each one circled in ink. Walter lingered by the door, his eyes flicking toward my study as though expecting to see it open. Everything go all right in town, Dad? Lauren asked too brightly. The pharmacy was busy, I said simply. That night, Bradley's voice carried through the vent. We need to push him harder. He's stalling. Lauren whispered back. Give it time. He's almost there. Once he signs, everything falls into place. I closed Sarah's notebook after adding the day's entry. January 19th. Met with Richard. Documents in preparation. Family pressing harder. They believe control is near. The house settled into uneasy quiet, but my mind was sharp. I walked to the study, placed the drawer just slightly ajar, and left Sarah's photo on the desk beside the fake papers Bradley had already snooped through. The real documents would come soon enough. Standing in the doorway, I looked at that photograph, her eyes calm, knowing. Don't worry, I whispered. I'm not letting them take it. They'll learn. Upstairs, Bradley laughed too loudly at something Lauren said. But beneath the sound, I could hear the edge of panic that letter had carved into him. They were still confident, but the cracks were spreading. And soon the whole facade would break. By Friday afternoon, Richard called again. The papers are ready, he said. I drafted them myself. Clean, professional, indistinguishable from the real thing. Buried clauses give you absolute control. If they sign, you hold proof of coercion. If they push you to sign, you hold evidence of intent. Either way, you're safe. I drove into town under the pretense of buying groceries. Richard's office smelled faintly of tobacco and leather, like it always had. He slid a crisp folder across the desk. The weight of it felt heavier than its few pages suggested. Don't wave it in their faces, he warned. Leave it where greedy eyes will wander. Let them believe they're in charge. I nodded. They already do. When I returned home, the house was alive with noise. Bradley's voice boomed from the living room, bragging about some future vacation. Lauren laughed too loudly. Walter and Margaret sat with wine glasses, their conversation brittle and forced. They looked like people on the verge of celebrating. I carried the groceries into the kitchen, placed the folder in my study drawer, and left it just slightly ajar. Then I joined them at the table, silent, letting their words spill unchecked. Dinner that evening was tense in a different way. They smiled too much, their questions rehearsed. "So, Dad," Lauren began, "have you thought more about making life easier? You shouldn't have to manage all this paperwork alone." Bradley leaned forward, his elbow on the table. "Yeah, Pops. Why drag your feet? You've got a chance to take it easy. Let us handle the hard parts." Walter chuckled. "It's only logical." Margaret nodded. "Practical, even." I dabbed my mouth with a napkin, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "Perhaps you're right," I said evenly. "I'll give it more thought." The relief in the room was palpable. Lauren reached across to squeeze my hand. Bradley leaned back, satisfied. Walter poured more wine. Margaret smiled for the first time that evening. They believed they were winning. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I moved through the hallways, listening. From behind Bradley and Lauren's door came muffled whispers. "He's close," Bradley muttered. "I saw the drawer. Papers are ready. He'll sign any day now." Lauren's voice followed, low and eager. "Finally, once it's official, everything falls into place." I returned to my study, opened Sarah's notebook, and wrote, January 21st. Folder examined. Family convinced I'm close to signing. Confidence dangerously high. The next morning, Bradley lingered in the kitchen, sipping coffee, his briefcase at his feet. He spoke casually, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Say, Pops. No rush, of course, but maybe we could sit down this weekend, just to make things official?" I looked up from my toast. "This weekend? Why wait?" he pressed. "No sense dragging things out. Better to have it neat and done." Lauren joined in, her hand on his arm. "It would give us all peace of mind, Dad. Think how much easier everything will be." Margaret chimed in. "You deserve that." Walter gave a solemn nod, as if the decision were already settled. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I nodded. "All right, this weekend we'll talk." The satisfaction that rippled across their faces was almost grotesque. Bradley tried to hide his grin behind his mug. Lauren's eyes shone with excitement. Margaret and Walter exchanged glances of victory. That evening, I checked the folder. The pages had been shuffled again, fingerprints smudged across the margins. Bradley had been there, maybe Lauren too. They couldn't resist touching what they thought was already theirs. In Sarah's notebook, I wrote, January 22nd. They planned to finalize this weekend. Greed accelerating. Overconfidence blinding them. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and stood in the doorway for a long moment. Sarah's photograph caught the glow from the lamp, her smile calm, unshaken. "They think I'm theirs to move," I whispered. "But they're already standing in the trap." Upstairs, Bradley laughed loudly at some joke Walter made. But the laugh cracked halfway through, jagged with nerves. The letter still haunted him. The papers tempted him. And soon both would destroy him. Saturday arrived heavy with expectation. I could feel it in the way the house moved. Lauren humming off key while setting the table for breakfast, Bradley restless, checking his phone every 5 minutes. Walter polishing his glasses as if preparing for a meeting, Margaret pacing near the kitchen window. They were waiting for something, circling like vultures ready to descend. After the dishes were cleared, Bradley cleared his throat. "So, Pops," he began casually, though his voice cracked just slightly, "we thought today might be a good time to go over those papers, just so we can all be on the same page." Lauren's hand settled on my arm, her smile rehearsed. "Yes, Dad. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just signatures, a few formalities, and you won't have to worry anymore." Walter nodded gravely, as though he were an impartial judge. "Best to handle it while everyone's calm. No sense delaying." Margaret chimed in. "It's only practical, David. Think of it as securing the future." I stirred my coffee slowly, deliberately, letting the silence stretch long enough for them to grow nervous. Then I set the cup down and nodded. "All right, let's sit in the study." Relief swept through the room like a tide. Bradley exhaled, trying to hide his grin. Lauren's eyes shone with triumph. Walter's lips curled in a satisfied half-smile. Margaret finally stopped pacing. They followed me down the hall, crowding into the study. The air grew warmer, thick with their anticipation. I walked to the desk, pulled the drawer open, and withdrew Richard's folder. The papers lay crisp and ready, every clause sharp as a blade. I placed them on the desk and tapped the top page. Everything we need should be here. Bradley leaned forward instantly, scanning the first sheet. His eyes darted greedily over the words, but not long enough to understand them. He nodded. Looks right. Lauren hovered behind him, her breath quick. Dad, this is perfect. Covers everything. Walter adjusted his glasses, squinting at the fine print for a second before grunting approval. Margaret smiled faintly, hands clasped as if in prayer. Why don't you go ahead and sign, Pops? Bradley said, sliding the pen toward me. I picked it up slowly, turning it between my fingers. The weight felt good, steady, inevitable. I bent over the paper, my handwriting deliberate, careful. Every stroke a quiet declaration. When I finished, I slid the pen back across the desk. There, I said softly. All yours now. Their faces lit up. Bradley snatched the pen, scrawling his signature with a flourish. Lauren signed next, her hand shaking with excitement. Walter followed, his name large and crooked. Margaret added hers last, her smile stretching wide. The papers lay before us, heavy with ink. To them it looked like victory. To me it was confession. I stacked the sheets neatly, placed them back in the folder, and closed it with deliberate care. That should take care of everything, I said. They exhaled as one, the room buzzing with satisfaction. Bradley leaned back, stretching his arms like a man who had conquered something. Lauren squeezed my shoulder, her relief spilling into laughter. Walter muttered something about calling a realtor. Margaret dabbed her eyes, whispering about new beginnings. I sat quietly, watching, my face calm. Inside, a different storm brewed. Every signature was another nail in the coffin of their schemes. Every page was proof of greed, betrayal, and intent. That evening, Bradley placed a celebratory bottle of wine on the table. He poured generously, raising his glass. To new chapters, he declared. They clinked glasses, drinking deep, their laughter ringing through the house. I sipped my wine slowly, my eyes drifting toward the study where the folder rested. The ink was still fresh, their signatures sharp. They had signed away more than they understood. Later, as the house settled into uneasy sleep, I returned to the study. I opened the folder, running my fingers over the pages. Each name shone under the lamplight, black on white, undeniable. I tucked the folder away, locked it, and placed Sarah's photo on top. Her smile seemed steadier than ever. They think it's theirs, I whispered, but it never was, and now it never will be. Upstairs, muffled laughter trailed into silence. Bradley's voice murmured, full of confidence. Tomorrow, he told Lauren, we call Zachary. He'll get the sale started. I closed the drawer, the lock clicking like a gavel. They thought the battle was over. They thought they had won. But the war had only just begun. The next morning the house felt different. Lighter, louder, almost festive. Bradley whistled as he made coffee. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in weeks. Lauren floated around the kitchen, humming, her phone clutched in her hand like a prize. Walter and Margaret sat at the table with wide smiles, speaking in half-whispers, their eyes bright with anticipation. It was the look of people who believed victory had already been secured. I sat quietly at the end of the table, stirring sugar into my tea. None of them noticed how still I was, how carefully I watched. Bradley raised his mug in mock salute. Pops, you won't regret this. We'll take care of everything. Lauren squeezed my hand, her voice sweet. You'll finally be free from all the stress, Dad. Just peace and quiet from here on out. Peace and quiet. Words that sounded less like comfort and more like burial. After breakfast, Bradley grabbed his phone and stepped onto the porch. His voice carried through the window, animated, smug. "Zachary, it's done," he signed. "Yeah, all of it. We'll move forward right away. Get the listing ready." Lauren joined him, her laugh drifting back into the kitchen. "We should celebrate tonight," she said. "It's finally happening." Walter leaned back in his chair, folding his hands over his stomach. "Told you it would work out. Just needed patience." Margaret nodded. "Poor man. He doesn't even realize how much better this will be for him." I kept my face neutral, sipping my tea. But inside, each word carved itself deeper into memory. He signed. "It's done." Their confidence had grown so large it blocked their vision entirely. By noon, Bradley was on his laptop, already browsing listings for new properties. Lauren circled numbers in a notebook, calculating imaginary profits. Walter and Margaret discussed renovations they'd make once the house was sold, even which furniture would be donated and which they'd keep. They spoke openly now, no longer whispering. In their minds, the battle was over. I retreated to my study, closing the door behind me. I unlocked the drawer and pulled out Richard's folder. The documents lay crisp and untouched since last night. I flipped through each page slowly, my eyes tracing every word. There it was, every clause, every hidden protection, every line that turned their supposed victory into a confession of intent. Their signatures gleamed on the bottom like trophies. I placed the folder back, locked the drawer, and wrote in Sarah's notebook, January 23rd. Bradley called Zachary. Family planning renovations, profit division. All convinced ownership is theirs. Trap complete. That evening, Lauren prepared a lavish dinner. Steak, wine, candles lit as if for celebration. Bradley poured generous glasses, his face flushed with excitement. Walter offered a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. They clinked crystal, drinking deeply, their laughter echoing through the dining room. I raised my own glass but only took a slow sip. As dessert was served, Bradley leaned back in his chair, grinning. "You'll thank us one day, Pops. When you're sitting back stress-free, you'll realize this was the best decision you ever made." I met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps," I said softly. He chuckled, mistaking my calm for acceptance. "You'll see. Zachary says we can have offers within the month. Quick sale, smooth transition. It's all falling into place." Lauren nodded eagerly. "Everything's finally working out." I excused myself early, carrying my half-finished wine into the study. The sound of their laughter followed me down the hall, muffled by the walls but still sharp. At the desk, I unlocked the drawer once more. The folder felt heavier than ever in my hands. I placed Sarah's photograph beside it, her calm smile watching over me. "They think it's theirs," I whispered. "But tomorrow they'll see what they really signed." The house grew quieter as night fell, their voices fading into slurred goodnights. Upstairs, Bradley's muffled words carried faintly through the vent. "It's done, Lauren. Finally done." But in the silence of my study, surrounded by the weight of evidence, I knew the truth. It wasn't done at all. The trap was only just beginning to close. Sunday morning arrived with a strange brightness. Sunlight poured across the kitchen floor. The smell of coffee filled the air. And yet there was tension beneath the cheer. Bradley sat with his laptop open, spreadsheets covering the screen. Lauren hovered beside him, jotting down numbers in a notebook. Walter shuffled through a pile of brochures. Margaret fussed with breakfast, humming, her movements restless. They were planning as though the house were already sold. I sat at the head of the table, sipping tea, my silence steady. Bradley tapped at his keyboard. "Zachary says interest is high. If we move quickly, we can close by spring. Buyers will line up for a place like this." Lauren's eyes sparkled. "We should start packing non-essentials. No reason to wait. Dad, you don't mind, do you?" I set my cup down carefully. "You'll want to be sure you actually have something to sell before you start boxing things." The words hung in the air. Bradley froze, fingers hovering above the keys. Lauren forced a laugh, brittle. "Of course we do, Dad. Everything's signed. It's official." Walter cleared his throat. "Don't worry, David. We've handled the hard part. You just relax. I looked at each of them slowly, letting the silence stretch. Relaxation comes easier when you know where you stand. Margaret fumbled with the coffee pot, spilling a few drops onto the counter. The cheer dimmed for just a moment. The rest of the day passed with forced conversation. Bradley barked orders at Lauren, telling her which rooms to start clearing. Walter muttered about hiring movers. Margaret suggested donating furniture. Their confidence was still there, but cracks showed at the edges. That evening, Bradley approached me in the study, his grin forced. "Pops, I know you're old-fashioned, but I just want you to see how much easier life will be once this is settled. No stress, no hassle. Just let us handle it." I gestured toward the folder still on my desk. "If you're so confident, read every line out loud." Slowly. He blinked, his smile faltering. "What's the point? We already signed." "Humor me," I said. Bradley hesitated, then flipped open the folder. His eyes darted across the page, skimming too quickly. After a few seconds, he laughed awkwardly and closed it. "Legalese. I'm no lawyer. That's why we simplify." I leaned back, folding my hands. Simplification often hides complexity. For the first time, he didn't have a reply. Later that night, as I walked the house, I passed their bedroom. Through the vent, I heard Lauren's worried whisper. "What if he knows?" Bradley hissed back. "He doesn't. He can't. He's bluffing." I smiled in the darkness. A bluff, perhaps, but one backed by evidence. In my study, I wrote in Sarah's notebook, January 24th. Confidence slipping. Bradley hesitated when asked to read aloud. Lauren suspicious. Doubt beginning. The next morning, I deliberately left the folder open on my desk. One page marked with a red ribbon. The clause clearly stated, "All property remains under the sole authority of David Harper. Any attempt at coercion nullifies secondary claims." I went about my morning routine, leaving the study door wide. Not an hour later, Margaret wandered by. She stopped, glanced in, and froze, her eyes fixed on the red-marked line. She leaned closer, lips moving as she read. Color drained from her face. She snapped the folder shut and hurried away, but I had already seen the tremor in her hand. By lunch, the household mood had changed again. Bradley snapped at Lauren, Walter sulked, Margaret clattered dishes loudly in the sink. No one spoke directly to me. At dinner, I cut my steak slowly, savoring each bite. "Strange thing about documents," I said casually. "Sometimes people think they say one thing when in fact they say another." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the scrape of Bradley's knife against his plate. "Dad," Lauren said finally, her voice tight, "you're not doubting this arrangement, are you?" I met her eyes evenly. "I never doubt what's written in black and white." She forced a smile, but her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her glass. That night, their voices behind closed doors were sharper, strained. "He's toying with us," Lauren hissed. Bradley's reply was low, angry. "Then we push harder. Tomorrow he won't have a choice." I closed Sarah's notebook, her photograph glowing faintly in the lamplight. They thought they still held control. But fear had entered the game, and fear always drives people to mistakes. The trap was tightening. Monday morning began with Bradley already pacing the kitchen, phone pressed tight to his ear. His voice was low, clipped. "Zachary, just hold off another day." "Yes," I said. He signed. "No, there won't be a problem." He hung up quickly when I entered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lauren set a plate in front of me, her tone far too cheerful. "Dad, we thought today might be a good day to finalize things. Just make sure everything's settled properly." Walter folded his newspaper with a sharp snap. "The sooner the better." Margaret hovered by the counter, wringing her hands. They weren't asking anymore. They were demanding, pressing, hoping to corner me. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Very well," I said. "Let's sit in the study." Their relief was immediate, though brittle. They followed me down the hall like eager students chasing approval. Bradley closed the door behind us with a little too much force, sealing the room as if to keep secrets from escaping. I opened the drawer and set the folder on the desk. "You all seem impatient," I said. "Shall we review?" Bradley pulled the papers toward him, flipping quickly. "We don't need to go through it again. It's already done. Just sign where we left off." I folded my hands, steady. "Interesting thing about signatures," I said quietly. "They can mean more than people realize. They can show intent, agreement, even guilt." Lauren blinked. "Dad, what are you saying?" I reached into the folder and withdrew the letter, the very one Bradley had received days earlier. I laid it flat on the desk, the county seal glinting under the light. "Perhaps you should read this aloud," I suggested. Bradley's face paled instantly. His hand twitched as he snatched the paper, shoving it back into the envelope. "That has nothing to do with this." Walter frowned. "What is it?" "Nothing," Bradley barked. "Just irrelevant paperwork." But Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Bradley, your hand is shaking." Silence stretched heavy in the room. I leaned back in my chair, my gaze calm. "It seems not everyone is as confident as they pretend. And I have more than letters." From the second drawer, I pulled a small envelope and slid it across the desk. Inside were photographs, printouts Richard had helped me make from the small cameras I'd hidden weeks ago. Bradley rifling through my desk. Lauren snapping pictures of documents. Walter and Margaret whispering in the hallway, glancing toward my door. I laid them out one by one, like cards in a hand of poker. Lauren's breath caught. Walter's face reddened. Margaret's lips parted in disbelief. Bradley slammed a fist against the desk. "This doesn't prove anything." "It proves enough," I said evenly. "It proves intent, proves greed, proves betrayal." The room crackled with tension. Lauren reached for the photos, but I pulled them back, slipping them neatly into the envelope once more. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. I met her eyes without flinching. "I should be asking you that." Bradley's jaw tightened, sweat beading at his temple. Walter muttered something about misunderstandings. Margaret dabbed her eyes with a tissue, but the energy had shifted. The victory they thought was secure now felt fragile, fragile enough to crumble with a single push. I tapped the folder lightly. "Every word in here is binding. Every signature you made is yours. Do you understand what that means?" Bradley tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "You're bluffing." I leaned forward just enough for my words to carry weight. "Am I?" The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, I stood, gathering the folder and envelope together. "That's enough for today. We'll continue this conversation soon." I left the study without waiting for their reply. Behind me, I heard whispers. Lauren's frantic tone, Bradley's anger boiling over, Walter's muttering, Margaret's choked sob. In the quiet of my room, I placed the documents beside Sarah's photo. Her eyes seemed to watch me, calm and certain. "They're breaking," I whispered. "Not long now." That night, the house was restless. Doors opened and shut. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Voices rose and fell in hurried arguments. Through the vent, Bradley's voice cracked with frustration. "He knows too much. We should have never pushed this far." Lauren whispered back, "What if it's already over?" I closed my notebook after recording their words. The walls of their confidence were collapsing. The trap was nearly shut. Tuesday morning dawned gray and heavy, clouds pressing low over the house. The silence at breakfast was brittle. Bradley pushed eggs around his plate without eating. Lauren kept glancing at me, then away, her smile failing to hold. Walter's paper remained folded, untouched. Margaret's hands trembled as she poured coffee, spilling drops onto the table. They were waiting, but this time not with triumph, with dread. I set my cup down gently. "Shall we meet in the study?" No one spoke, but they followed. The shuffle of their footsteps down the hall sounded like a funeral procession. Inside, I placed the folder and the envelope neatly on the desk. I didn't sit. Instead, I stood behind the chair, letting them feel the weight of the silence. "Last night," I began, my voice steady, I heard you. Through the vents, through the walls. Your whispers aren't as secret as you think. Lauren flinched. Bradley's jaw clenched. Walter stared at the carpet. Margaret dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I opened the folder, sliding the papers across the desk. You all signed these, without reading, without thinking, believing you had outsmarted me. Bradley's voice cracked. We trusted you'd go along. That's all. I shook my head slowly. No, you trusted I was blind. But I wasn't. I pointed to the clauses Richard had written, my finger steady on the page. This line ensures sole authority remains mine. This one invalidates claims made under coercion. This one records signatures as acknowledgement of intent. Their eyes scanned the words, panic blooming with every line. I withdrew the letter next, laying it flat. And this? Proof the county already watches you. Bradley, your name is on it. Property misrepresentation. Fraud. They already suspect. His face drained of color. Sweat broke across his forehead. Finally, I opened the envelope and spread the photographs across the desk. Lauren rifling through drawers. Bradley snapping pictures. Walter and Margaret whispering outside my study door. Each image stamped with date and time. This, I said quietly, is betrayal captured in black and white. No one moved. The only sound was the tick of the clock on the wall. Bradley slammed his hand on the desk, but the gesture rang hollow. This doesn't change anything. It changes everything, I replied calmly. These documents, this letter, these photos, they show intent. Malice. Greed. A jury wouldn't need more. Lauren's voice broke into a whisper. Dad, please, we didn't mean. You meant every word. I cut in. Every laugh at that party. Every whisper you thought I didn't hear. Every plan you made while sitting under my roof. Walter muttered something about misunderstandings, but even his voice wavered. Margaret cried softly, shoulders shaking. I gathered the papers into the folder, tapped them into a neat stack, and slid them back into the drawer. The click of the lock echoed finality. You will pack your things, I said quietly. Today. You will leave this house and not return. Lauren's tears flowed freely now, but I saw no true remorse, only fear. Bradley opened his mouth as if to argue, but his eyes flicked to the locked drawer, and the words died in his throat. Walter helped Margaret to her feet, his face pale. By evening, suitcases thudded down the stairs. Closets hung empty. Doors slammed. The last sound was the front door closing with a dull echo, leaving silence behind. I walked through the house slowly, room by room, breathing in the quiet. Their laughter, their whispers, their scheming all gone. Only the creak of floorboards and the faint scent of Sarah's roses through the window remained. On the porch, I sat with Sarah's quilt over my lap, the cool evening air brushing against my face. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, lighting up again and again. Lauren's number, Bradley's, even Walter's. The screen filled with missed calls, the counter climbing higher. By the time the sun dipped below the trees, the number read 62 missed calls. I turned the phone face down, the buzzing muffled against the wood. The yard was quiet, the roses swayed gently, and for the first time in a long time, the house felt whole again. Inside, Sarah's photograph waited in the study, her smile steady. I whispered into the evening air. It's done, love. They'll never take what we built. The clock ticked softly, each second a reminder that patience, silence, and truth had been my greatest allies. And as the night settled around me, I felt peace. Not the false kind they had promised, but the real peace of knowing I had protected what was mine.